We're going to bring to the stage one of our featured speakers, Dr. Sarvajana Dwivedi, the co-founder of Pearl Therapeutics.
So this is about building Pearl company, how I built it, where I come from. So a little bit of this is my story, but this is also the story of what we accomplished at Pearl. There's going to be a little bit of science in here, some engineering, some story of innovation, some story of entrepreneurism, some story of how did it all come together at a really, really tough time economically when the global economy was down. Pearl was launched in 2007, about a year before the global economy collapsed. And despite that, we built it into a billion-dollar company in 2013. How did we do it? That's the story that I'd like to share with you. So, right-click, down, right, or this. Okay, all right. So the company is called Pearl, but it was really focusing on these two diseases, asthma and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Asthma is episodic constriction of airways such that you choke while you're trying to breathe, and then you suddenly need to relieve that, and the airflow starts. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease is where patients are always like this. Take a deep breath, hold it. Now try to go through your life that way. Every single day in every chore you do. That's what COPD is about. And both of these conditions are progressively worsening conditions. The disease worsens over lifetime. And COPD particularly ends up taking away years and years of your life. There are millions and millions of patients who have never smoked. This is supposed to be a smoker's disease, but there are almost 30% of COPD patients worldwide that have never smoked. Ladies in Mexico or Central America or in India or in other parts of the world cooking with coal or wood. They are smoking, they are inadvertently getting COPD. These patients need a lot of help. As their lung function declines, the resource with which they breathe medication into the lungs declines over time. The number of medicines these patients have to inhale increases with time. And this is a quandary in drug delivery that I wanted to solve, that we wanted to solve at Pearl, and that's the story I will tell you. So, how did we do it? All right, this is not useful. This is much more useful. So, how did we do it? Well, it was really driven by teachings of three of my teachers. And the family I grew up in, where I grew up in India, we always acknowledge our teachers, where you learn from. So that's what I'm doing very first in my talk, acknowledging my teachers. On the very left-hand side, okay, all of these pictures somehow got back to their full size. It's amazing. I only had the headshots in the middle one, and I don't know what the magic is here. So in the middle here, in the traditional Indian garb, is my father, Professor Reva Prasad Dwivedi. He is a living legend. But he lost his parents when he was very young, and he became a living legend despite that. He traveled about 600-700 kilometers away from his hometown to a city called Varanasi, where I grew up, and he studied Sanskrit, which is an ancient Indian language. It's still very much an alive language. And as an orphan, totally dependent on others, he became a living legend. How? Hard work. And never, ever giving up. Under any circumstances, never, ever giving up. Every exam, every test, every degree, top marks, first class, gold medalist. And now he is a living legend. Students write PhD thesis on him. He has written twice as much original literature as Shakespeare wrote in his entire life. For centuries to come, his work will be remembered. But these are the things he taught me: tenacity, hard work, and deep learning. Not memorization, understanding. With understanding comes memorization. So that's what he taught me. He's still alive, 87-year-old, still working hard, 14-hour days in his library every day, still writing poetry, prose, etc., etc. So that's my first teacher. The second teacher is in the middle, Dr. Alan Mitchell. He was in Canada. So I left, India to come study with him because I heard about him. The story about him was when he finished his PhD in early 60s or late 60s actually, the first body of work he did after graduating directly contradicted his PhD supervisor's work. So I figured he would always teach me the right things. When I showed up in his lab in Canada in 1986, for 6 years he taught me scientific methodology. He again taught me comprehension, and he again taught me the value of thinking and understanding the system that you're dealing with and not fighting it. And the nature will always reward you. That's what he taught me. Work with nature, not against it. Because we are in the business of fighting diseases. Those are nature's revolt. And unless you really understand nature, you really cannot coax it to do what you want it to do, which is to give up and make the person happy. So, or healthy. So that's what he taught me. He's also alive, very, very sturdy, still working hard, still retired, but still very much engaged in the world of science. And the third teacher is more recent. He's young. He's one of the most prolific entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley that you will find in the medical device and pharmaceutical space, Mir Imran. He joined Rutgers, I believe, to do PhD. In 6 months wrote a PhD thesis. That's the story. I don't know how valid it is. And they said, no, it takes 4 years. He said, I don't need your PhD left. Went to Johns Hopkins, the first implantable defibrillator, because it required knowledge of biology, engineering, algorithms, software, he developed at Johns Hopkins. And since then, many of his inventions have helped millions and millions of patients get better. John Glenn, when he went back to the space, the sensors on him to monitor at his age what was going on in his body, he was one of the designers, Mir Imran. What he taught me was the value of problem solving. Solve problems, focus on clinical answers, clinical value creation, and wealth will be a byproduct, side effect. Don't focus on money in your pocket before you really have focused on solving problems for others. That's what he taught me. So these are 3 of my teachers. Okay? And Imran Bhai, he's like my older brother, so I call him Brother Bhai. He is still very much engaged in the world of entrepreneurism. All 3 of them, a devout Hindu, a Christian, and a vegetarian Muslim. All right. All 3 of them taught me immense things along the way, and I'm really deeply grateful for what they have taught me. So their learnings and these learnings will all come in, they all came in handy in building Pearl, and this is what my journey is. So those of you who are young, who are still trying to go through your life, your journey will take you through a variety of different experiences. Your job is to make sure you learn from every one of them. Okay? If you keep your eyes and ears open, you will always get valuable lessons. Sometimes things will appear tough, but you never know when that knowledge is going to come in handy downstream. All right? And that is the value in this slide. I grew up in India at a place called Banaras Hindu University, where my father was a professor of Sanskrit. He still is a professor emeritus there. My brother is now a professor of Sanskrit at this university. My sister is a professor of Sanskrit in India. I left and joined sciences. Okay, the black sheep in the family. All right. My primary motivation at that point in time and early in life was somebody in the family has to go earn some money, okay? Because the world of Sanskrit really, I mean, it has been tremendously rewarding to us. It gave us a fantastic life, really, really comfortable lifestyle. But to really go from where we could go to through the next generations of the family, somebody really had to do something different, and I just chose to go into the pharmacy arena at the same university. But then I left in 1986, came to UBC, the other end of the planet, from Varanasi to Vancouver. Okay, and 6 years there, I told you about my professor. He taught me a lot. And then I wanted to become a professor. And he said, no, you'll be a fool to be a professor. Because he was getting calls from industry offering me job at a salary at which he was about to retire. He said, look, you go into industry, you'll be a fool to ignore that kind of a compensation for what you know. Just go to the industry and you'll solve problems. And I followed my professor blindly. I joined Glaxo. Glaxo was the largest company at that point in time. They called me from North Carolina. They couldn't understand my accent. I couldn't understand their accent. This was in 1992 rather. It was a funny relationship. You know, the departmental administrative assistant, I complained about her accent, she complained about mine, and we had a fantastic time for 6 years thereafter. So 1992 Glaxo. Now Glaxo threw me straight into the deep end. I was a fresh PhD who had just understood how taking small amounts of powder and putting them into a machine and compressing the powder together at 10, 12 tons of pressure forms a tablet, and why some powders don't form tablet. This was physics of powder compression. In pharmaceutical business, that is engineering. That's what I learned at UBC, at the University of British Columbia. And Glaxo called me and said, look, we want you to work in inhaled medicines. And I said, look, are you really sure you want to hire me into that? Because I know how to keep particles together. I make tablets. And they said, you know how to keep them together, so you know how to keep them apart too. Join us. So this was my indoctrination into out-of-the-box thinking. And I'm really, truly grateful to that manager who hired me into this business. Because without him, I wouldn't have learned this business of keeping particles apart. I said, sure, I'll come join you. And they threw me straight into commercial manufacturing, where they were having lots of products made. Those products were making lots of revenue stream happen in outside of the US, but US standards were way higher than European ones, and none of those products could be launched in the US. And my job was to see if those manufacturing can be improved in the UK. So that's that middle arrow there, GSK in the UK. And nobody in the UK in commercial plant wanted me. Why can't you guys in the US just take what we make? Why do you really have to come improve things here? And 6 months of investigation, seeing what they were fundamentally doing, understanding how the particles were flowing, how the particles filled together in the inhaler, and how they were redispersed, the same people who rejected me initially were offering me a job. That's the value of knowledge. That's the value of what my professor taught me, applied in practical world, and showing them with evidence they could actually improve. So they could lose less batches. They could save 20% of revenue stream right there. That was within sort of 1 year of me. So I understood the value of science and business interaction, and then then my tube light lit up what my professor meant about me going into the industry and really applying my knowledge. So that was in Glaxo. 6 years at Glaxo, wonderful, worked on some of the major brands. If those of you might have seen the ad on the TV, the round purple inhaler called Advair. It was an $8 billion brand per year. It made Glaxo that much money for almost a decade per year. The formulation inside it is my formulation. So I have had the privilege of helping millions of patients in my very early career, and that hooked me on to the value of products. Okay? So you focus on how you can help patients. And then I left Glaxo, came to Dura in San Diego, worked on electromechanical inhalers, understood how one earthquake in Taiwan would dry up the ASIC supply that was in the inhaler, and how that was highly risky investment. So don't ever do that again. That's what I learned. Went to Alkermes, worked halfway between MIT and Harvard at a little company that was trying to come up with these low density particles that would float in the air really, really well and make better delivery for the lungs happen. So I learned that part too, but there I was managing device people. Not a single formulation person, no drug, only devices. I learned a whole lot about how to make plastics work in the pharma industry. Somebody trusted me that I could do the job. I said, sure, if you trust me, I'll come do the job. And that's just the way to go and learn new things. Then came to Nectar in Silicon Valley. So that's how I ended up from Varanasi to Vancouver to Silicon Valley. All along the way, learning new things, building foundations, and then trying to sort of move up the knowledge value chain. I've never moved up the title value chain. They've all come along the way. The only thing I've done is learned new things. Even now, today, there are things I'm learning. So along the way, in these about 10 or 12 years or so in my career, this is what I found. That traditionally for 40, 50 years in the world of modern inhalers for those asthma and those COPD patients where lung function is declining, we have been in the industry using these kind of particles, the ones that are shown on the left-hand side. These are drug crystals crushed down to a tiny size that is right for aerosolization and deposition into the lungs, but these particles are dense. And they are usually fairly smooth on surface, so they stick to each other. Their natural tendency is to grow bigger, okay? And therefore, over time, what happens is that they fall out of air quickly, so quickly that they only deposit in the central lung, not throughout the periphery where, for example, smoke goes. If the damaging aerosols are delivering damage throughout the lungs, the medicinal aerosol should deliver medicine throughout the lungs too. A simple principle. But that was really not being enabled even though the products were making $8 billion a year in revenue stream. And that's the problem on the left-hand side. This is the problem that was fixed by inventions of these low-density porous particles, these cheese ball-like particles in mid-90s that I had seen when I was at Glaxo. And those particles would deposit more uniformly throughout the airways. And since they are easily aerosolizable, since they are not flat on surfaces, they only have point contact, so they are easily separable. And since they are low density, they have low density nature, they are more buoyant, like kernel of popcorn and popped corn. You know, in an air popper, the popped corn, the same mass spread over a bigger volume pops out, but the kernel doesn't. That's the difference here. These particles would go throughout the airway. So I felt that these particles made a lot of sense to make products with. Those patients deserved products based on these particles. When I ended up at Nectar, the technology of combining these particles with these inhalers that you are familiar with, these aerosol sprays. These are the only inhalers that actually generate the aerosol for the patient. Even though my Advair generated a lot of revenue stream, it still required effort by the patient to aerosolize the particle. Well, these inhalers don't. They have been around for 60 years now, 50 years when I launched Pearl. So that was in 1956 when these inhalers first came about. Now, inside these inhalers is a liquid, which boils off at room temperature, and if the particles are in the droplets of that liquid, they get aerosolized and the patients inhale. So in this liquid, those traditional particles fall down. They just don't remain dispersed, whereas these low density particles would remain dispersed because liquid penetrates the pores and everything becomes sort of more or less similar in density, so the particles remain afloat. And if the drug is inside those porous particles, then the drug remains afloat too, and you get really, really good deposition. So combining an aerosol generator that didn't require patient's effort and low density particles that float really well made perfect sense. It was just common sense to me. And this technology existed at my fourth company called Nectar Therapeutics in the Silicon Valley. So I went to the management. I said, look, we should work on this. You have brought me in with my experience at these companies to work on new products. Let me propose a new product. Let's take Advair combination, put that into this inhaler with these particles, and we'll be able to deliver the same medicines way better. So you're not taking any medicine risk. All you're doing is taking delivery risk. It makes a lot of sense. And the management said no. That was in 2003. It was perhaps too common sense in investment. The reason was Nectar was totally focused on one thing and only one thing, which is delivering insulin through the lungs into the bloodstream. That was already a done deal in my opinion. Now the next generation things had to come. So I proposed the same product idea the next year. They said no again, and that was October of 2004 or August of 2004. So that's when I sat down with a colleague of mine who was in corporate development, and the two of us were really champions of this. So we sat down 30 minutes. That was the meeting time in a conference room named Saluki. And it was a commiseration session. 30 minutes of pure commiseration about the management. What's wrong with them? Why don't they get it? It's just so simple. The idea makes perfect sense, and the technology is there. We already have it scaled up. Let's just do the investment, move on. That 30-minute commiseration session turned into a 2.5-hour meeting, at the end of which we had agreed we are not going to let this management sit on it. We are going to ask for rights of this technology and spin out a company on our own. That's just how I became an entrepreneur, okay? The quest of pursuing products required entrepreneurism as the means to develop the products. That's how I became an entrepreneur. It was not a decision that now my career is going down a path of entrepreneurism. It was just a desire to develop products. There was no other choice left. And we asked the management that Christmas, would you give us a license? They said, propose terms. We proposed terms, and they said, no, we are not going to give you these terms. What terms are you willing to? Every meeting took 4 months, 5 months. It's just a completely miserable phase, very slow decision-making phase. It took us 2.5 years to get the terms agreed, but we never gave up. If you know your judgment is right, the two things together made perfect sense. Low-density particles with an aerosol generator. If you know your judgment is right, don't ever give up. Be like that little dog that latches onto the trouser. That's how I was inside Nectar to the management. Never gave up. The lawyers, the chairman of the board members, the CFO, the CEO, etc., 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 the company founder of Nectar's company founder, he was worried that we would end up hiring all of his best people. So we said, okay, for 7 years, we will not hire anybody from Nectar. We'll go form a team from outside. We gave them everything they wanted. We got the license. Took us 2.5, 3 years. 12 weeks after that, we had first $22.5 million raised. Okay? Because the idea made sense. So if your judgment is right, if you are confident that your judgment is right, and this is a message to the youth in the room, don't ever give up. But base that judgment based on science, on facts, on evidence, not just gumption, not just that I want to do something big and therefore I must be right. No, you really base it on evidence. I took about 12 years of college education and another 10 to 12 years of working in the industry before I became an entrepreneur. It took that much base building to have the confidence to go take the risk to say no to the Nectar management, leave my job, and my children were still young. One of them was in elementary school, one of them had just entered middle school, and then started Pearl. So this combining with low density particles, we took the license and then we started building the company. First principle in building the company is people. A company is when people get together for a common mission. That's what the term company means. Not bricks, not mortar, not facilities, not computers, not data, not labs, people. So we focused on finding the deepest knowledge, the best brains that we could find. And the beauty of this whole arrangement for us, fortunately, was that Nectar gave us 2.5 years to think through all this while paying me, okay? Because for 2.5 years, they were saying, no, we won't want to give you a license, while complaining, when are you going to leave Nectar? I said, the day you give me a license, I will leave. Sure enough, January 11th or 17th, 2007, the license was signed. 29th, I was out of there, okay, with a $500,000 loan from Nectar, which we were supposed to pay back, but we had to fund ourselves and our lawyers and everyone else while we were building the team. And May of 2007 is when the money came in. The first money actually came into the company, and we paid within 1 month the company back the $500,000 loan. So you take risks. Now, if that funding hadn't occurred, the $500,000, where would I would have paid it back from? I have no idea. Nectar would have just written it off. But in any case, you take the risks because your judgment is right. So we found the best talent in California, and this was the talent that knew how to make these low-density particles. Then we found incredible talent out of big pharma in New Jersey that knew how to do clinical testing. because asthma and COPD, these are so big diseases, they are so large in numbers that clinical trials have to be at the scale of 2, 3, 4,000 patients over 6 months, a year long time. We really needed the best minds who can manage that well. And we wanted people who could handle FDA well, who could work with manufacturing well, who could make these inhalers well, and they were all in North Carolina, my alma mater, industrial alma mater, Glaxo. My Glaxo colleagues told me that, look, if you are in, we are in. They left Glaxo. Nobody could hire them out of Glaxo. I did. 20 years later, they left Glaxo to join us. And we hired people where they were and left them where they were. We said, we really don't need you to come to California. Why should a new employee, when he or she chooses to join us, his or her family should suffer? That was number one principle in my mind. If the family is not disrupted, that employee would be immediately effective to us. And that's exactly what happened. We were able to build value really, really fast because people were comfortable in their own environment. So that's how we started building company. Okay, you have the charger in, but it says battery is running low. Here we go. This is the only company picture we ever took. Because rest of the time when the company grew, it was just too big for us to try to bring everybody together. November 2007 is only when, and most of these people, especially some of the leaders that we hired in the company, were still with us, and they are still with us 10, 12 years later, because they were all committed to the cause of making products, not exiting once the money was made. They were all professionals. They were not just money makers. So this is the only company. This is in the middle is my co-founder, Adrian Smith. Now, he was about this tall. I am who I am. We used to work my shoulder to his elbows, not shoulder to shoulder. But that's the original team. 2 or 3 of these people left, joined academia. 2 of them have retired. 1 or 2 of them gone on to become chief financial officers of other company, operating heads. One of them changed profession. Another one went and became an entrepreneur. They're all well positioned in their lives. And we raised money, but we raised money from smart investors. You really want to raise money from investors who are knowledgeable. And you heard Mr. K.P. Reddy, those who are actually well versed in your sector take that money. If you simply take money from anybody, and we knew we would need a lot of capital. The first 3 investors were the ones who gave us, so that's Claris Ventures in the middle. Again, it was a big logo. It certainly became small on this screen. I don't know what's going on here. First 3 investors, they funded us to the tune of $65 million, even though we were raising first $15 million. And how did we convince them? We didn't write a big business plan, no glossy covers, no binded book sheets, no bound books, etc., etc. We had one Excel spreadsheet and a 22-slide presentation, and that's how we raised the first $15 million. That's all we needed. The 7 years Excel spreadsheet was the full operating plan of the company. In that, I had all the milestones, and that was in the 2.5 years. It took a spreadsheet that took 2.5 years to create. All the milestones year by year, the headcount growth along the way, the functional area expenses along the way, all the incidentals, facility costs, benefits, you name it, everything added together. If they would ask me what the budget looked like for the $15 million, I would give them a 7-year, $300 million budget. Because that's what it takes to develop these products. And that convinced them that these are not just entrepreneurs who are coming seeking money for the next milestone. They are on a path. And they knew as a result that they would be able to exit any time along the path if they wanted to. But these guys are going to build big value. They were convinced. They were not afraid of 7-year, $300 million spreadsheet, and they knew the first 15. They wanted to fund us to the tune of $22 million, not 15, because that would have given them more equity early on. We said, no, we only need 15. And then we raised more and more and more. And then we brought in a 4th investor at the bottom of the economy in 2010, Vatera. This is a private fund out of New York, not a classical venture fund. It's a single individual, his private wealth of over $2 billion, about $2 billion. He set aside about $150 million, from which they committed $100 million more. Why? Because they had built previously pharma companies. So you pool these 4 investors together, we raised $167.5 million from them. That 0.5 was the one we paid our nectar back, so 167 total. And then execution. You go into a business and you raise capital. And I have seen in Silicon Valley, and I've seen other places too, raising the first capital is such a tough journey that when that happens, the entrepreneurs feel really accomplished. And that's when they let go, okay? Because they feel they are accomplished. That's really when the journey begins, okay? That's what happened. We set a budget, and we set the budget so transparently. Everybody in the company knew, and I was personally managing the budget and orchestrating the budget, that we set a metric of, this year we are going to be spending $5,000 a day. Every day, everybody knew how much money was spent, and they had to feel that that day value was created. So how do you build a $1 billion company a day at a time? $1 at a time. And then we had such strict budgetary discipline that we would spend money on the highest quality people, highest quality equipment, but not the highest quality ambiance. We took 7,000 square feet space when we only needed about 5,000 square feet or 2,500 square feet, and we filled it up with cubes, the open office environment, and those cubes came from where? Oracle was dismantling 16 floors of their cube space, so we just borrowed some of those in the aftermarket. Sun Microsystems had gotten rid of many of their facilities, so their $500 6-caster chairs were available for $25 or $50 each. We bought a bunch of them. Our boardroom table came free from Sun Microsystems. Okay, for 5 years we held boardroom meetings on that particular table. It's still there. We spent money where we really needed to for the highest quality minds, highest quality equipment, best quality data, but everything else, we kept everything very, very frugal. The time to save money is when you have money, all right? That's what we actually implemented on a day-to-day basis. This year, we are a part of AstraZeneca now. We are 5th year as being a part of AstraZeneca, and we are spending almost $1 million a day. And until last Friday, I was still signing checks, and I'll show you a picture of that. So we kept our systems also inexpensive. We could have brought in SAP, we could have brought in other software systems that would have costed us a lot to deploy, a lot to manage, et cetera, et cetera. No, we actually launched our first product with the company's accounting still being done on QuickBooks. Okay? It's doable. We just have to think simply, but aim high. And we were able to execute extremely well, and speed. Speed was everything along the way. Now, this picture is not supposed to be here. This computer, I know, somebody's hacking it. That slide, I don't know where that came from. So what we did was, actually no, this is where it came from. I had only 2 pictures on this slide. So if you look at the invention we made, actually let me get to that. The display is messed up here. So when we started the company then, so we transferred the technology from parent company, the porous particle, the drug inside, and we put the drug inside the porous particles into these liquid suspension inside our meter dose inhalers, and we formed fantastic suspensions. They look really milky white, very, very consistent. We could make sure that every dose was coming out very, very smoothly because crystals weren't settling down. And it turned out that in a matter of weeks we found that, or months, we found that the drug inside these porous particles were leaving. It was leaving the porous particles, dissolving in the liquid and forming crystals. So the thing that we licensed the porous particle technology for, which was to defeat the sedimentation of crystals, was being defeated by the nature of the drug that tended to crystallize out of porous particles. And we were completely, the right word is flummoxed, right? We were completely sitting there wondering, now what do we do? Because the drug is really not acting as it's supposed to act, or the way we want it to act. So the engineers said, let's try to force the drug back in there. By golly, we got enough engineering finesse to make these porous particles with this drug inside, and they were trying experiment A, B, C, D, E. Along the way, my professor's learning came to my mind that if the drug's natural tendency is to form crystals, there is no way we are going to be able to keep it inside the porous particles as molecules. And the engineer said, there's no way this is going to work. I kept telling them, look, we have to figure out a way of using this drug's crystals. And they kept saying, no, if you put crystals in there, they're going to sediment, and the porous particles, they will do nothing. And to our complete surprise, what we found was that when we put just the crystals and blank porous particles together, the two of them attach to each other like dandelions do. The seed doesn't fly, but the umbrella flies everywhere. With it, the seed flies everywhere. That's what happened. The crystals actually started to associate with these porous particles, and they started to float, as shown in this slide. Okay, this one is not hacked. And this is a video. So you will actually see this in action. The left vial is only the crystal suspension. You can see in a matter of few seconds, the crystals start to flock together, and you start to see concentration in homogeneity. You can see more liquid through these crystals, and in a matter of a few seconds, everything starts to settle down. Clear liquid goes up, whereas when to these crystals, exact same crystals, when we add the porous particles, they remain afloat. And as a result of that, with every single shot, we get the same dose every single time. And this is the number one problem with these inhalers, for which we had to move away from these inhalers, even though they made sense, to the dry powder inhalers, like the Advair, etc., where patient has to inhale the powder. So we defeated this natural tendency by discovering this natural association between low density and high density particles. We discovered these dandelion-like structures in this liquid, and that gave us a brand new patent family, starting in 2008. And this discovery happened a month before Lehman Brothers collapsed in New York. So just when we had found a brand new platform with which we could take any drug, drug 1, drug 2, drug 3, and put them with these low density particles and make a product really quickly and advance the things really rapidly, and we knew we needed to raise more money. The next raise we needed was about $70 million. By then we had raised $33 million. Entire investment community dried up. We went to 50 investors, not one of them invested. But not one of our team members got nervous along the way. Everybody in the company still stayed together. And we had only about 2 weeks of cash left in the company when we closed a $69 million financing with the fourth investor coming in 2010, and the rest is history. Using that investor's capital, we advanced a lot of different products. So that's the story there. 2003, the dream. 2007, the first dollars. 2008, the invention, the red phase where we had actually the high-risk phase. 2008 to 12 execution. When we raised the capital, we were able to now advance products so fast, so quickly with budgetary discipline that in 2013 we reached what we call phase 3, 4,000 patients worth of testing. We started that at the end of May of 2013, and middle of 2013, June, 2 weeks later, AstraZeneca made a deal with our investors to buy us for $1.15 billion. We created a $1 billion company at the bottom of the economy because we solved compelling scientific problems. We put the right team together. We executed very well. We spent money wisely. And we actually started product journey, not technology journey. So this is the value of actually focusing on products. And this is me writing the company away. Okay, the last stock certificate, this is a picture taken in the lobby of my company's law firm. And with no disrespect to the lawyers in the room, this picture is a little bit out of focus. A lawyer took it. You know? Sorry about that. But I'm smiling. Why? Because now the company became a part of AstraZeneca, which had much deeper pockets. After the $1.15 billion deal in 2013 June, they have funded us with another $1.5 billion. So I'm one of those rare few fortunate scientists whose vision has fetched $2.5 billion in commitment. That is incredible. That is all because of what I learned from my teachers. So to those of you who are still trying to rise through the world of learning, through the world of science and engineering, it's entirely possible to do what I've done. You just have to stay focused on problem solving and products. One more thing, as I told you, the last check, last Friday, I wrote this check, and now the company is on SAP platform, finally, 10 years later, because it's part of AstraZeneca. I don't have to sign checks, but along the way, I must have signed checks and approved wires of over $250 million. So you get to do those kind of big spends as well. Now, it all happens along the way. So now we finally have one product launched. 2 or 3 more products hopefully will be launched in the next 2 to 3 years. And finally, that vision of providing patients the same inhaler type with this fine technology is going to be materializing for the first time in 60 years of these modern inhalers. It's transformative. You really feel that you've accomplished something for millions of patients. I'm looking forward to that day. So, when you try to solve these kind of problems, this is the kind of thing that happens every once in a while. So 4 years ago, when I came to Tampa, when Professor Chari invited me, this was the brochure on the top, a Nobel laureate. Now, Dr. Murthy, some really accomplished people, and my name was in there as visionaries who have seen the future, visionary leaders who have seen the tomorrow. And you do all these things along the way, build a company, sell the company, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, spend big money and big products. The story is really not about you. You really need to stay true to your basis and make sure that you always recognize your enablers. Your team is a lot more important than you are. This is December 2017, just about 4 months ago. This picture was taken with the latest senior team of Pearl. It has grown from 6 or 7 people to about 30 people. The company is now about 350 plus people strong, and it's continuing to thrive under AstraZeneca. Now people are getting assimilated into AstraZeneca. So we have come a full circle, but majority of the people that started with us, that built us along the way, that got us to the point of $1 billion exit, are still there. They're all still working on this vision of products. So that's the story of building Pearl. I'm hoping that this will be of value to some of you. I'm hoping that this would teach you that coming from as humble a background that I come from, if I can do this, you can do this too. And if there are any questions, happy to take them now or later. Thank you.
So anybody who saw the flyer saw that Dr. Dwivedi was on here with other billion-dollar companies, not on the back page, but on the front of the flyer. Yes, Kunal.
I'll be very brief. That was a fantastic story. You said in the beginning you were looking for $15 million, but you end up getting $65 million. How does it feel?
Well,
and why did you accept another additional revenue when you said that that was not your goal to accept more money? You just wanted to have that much to build the product.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I probably was not very clear. We were raising 15, but the investors, all 3 of them, they said, look, for companies' future needs, we need to set aside more money. So we raised 15, but they had internally set aside another 50 for us. And no, they knew that we will need, when I told them we need first 15, then the next raise was 35, then the next was 70, 75. Right, so the investors knew about those raises coming. So internally within their venture funds, they set aside an additional 50 million together.
Is this product out in the market?
The first one is out in the market. It's called Bevespi. It's in the US market. It's a 2-drug combination. But the one that's behind it, which is a 3-drug combination, is coming. And that, I believe, is going to be way more valuable for patients. The first one just opens up airways of COPD patients maximally by depositing the aerosols the way it does. But the third one, the third drug added to it, also keeps the airways clean. It's an inhaled steroid. So now you add those 3 together. Once you give the patients those 3 together early in the disease profile, can we add a few years to their life, or at least make sure that their breathing function remains clean, consistent for a long term? That's what we are hoping for. So AstraZeneca is investing in that and more products beyond that. So I think there's going to be a family of products in the next few years' time frame.
Again, Dr. Dwivedi, thank you for sharing your inspiring and incredible journey. Dr. Dwivedi not only has a claim for having built a unicorn and sold his company for more than $1 billion, he's probably very few that can really claim the products he invented made the world a better place, right? He advanced the humanity forward. So first of all, we want to thank you for saving lives and, and improving the quality of life for millions of people.
My pleasure.
Second thing I learned too is, he said he learned these core values and lessons from his parents as well as teachers. I'm sure all of us heard those lessons, right? But again, he's a great example of proving that applying those ideas and executing on those ideas helps you build a great company, okay? And again, I think hopefully we can take that lesson and execute it in our own entrepreneur journey to do it. And again, Dr. Dwivedi, we want to thank you for coming to Tampa. He has been a charter member of TIE Silicon Valley and contributing to TIE and to the entrepreneurs. And again, as a token of appreciation from all of us at Tampa, please.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. This is brilliant. A glass pearl.
Thank you, Dr. Dwivedi.